start by saying who you are and what position you occupied at the college?
I'm Stacey Yap, and I'm a sociology professor in the social science department.
And what year did you come to Plymouth?
I came to Plymouth in 1986 as part-time, and got a tenure track full-time in 1988.
Okay, a few years later, okay.
Yeah.
And of course, I know Stacey very well because I walked down Mount Prospect and it took me a long time to convince her not to give me a ride. But I do appreciate you offering that ride there. So how many years then were you employed at Plymouth, including part-time and full-time?
30.
30
Yeah,
years.
yeah, 30 years. Retired about 2016.
Okay, and what kind of changes did you see in terms of the arrangement of the department that you were in over those years?
I think it's grown. I think when I came in as a part-time, I was never meant to teach. I came in and somebody said, oh, you know, we need somebody who is doing, who is going to be able to teach anthropology because someone else is going on sabbatical. And I said, okay, you know, I'll do anthropology for that semester. And then somehow the person came back and they asked me to stay on. And so I started in a field that is completely not my cup of tea, I would say. But it has never been a cup of tea for me because I have a business degree, and then I went into graduate school in sociology, mainly because I was doing marketing research, or very interested in doing that. So when I graduated with a doctorate in sociology, because I stayed on after master's and I got into that, I went back to Singapore where I came from, and I became the director of a marketing research company for 4 years. And then during that time, I teach for the Institute of Marketing. So I never was in sociology from the very beginning, never was in anthropology, and somehow I got married to Ping Kwan Chong and you know, came here. I was doing marketing research freelancing in Boston, so I drove a lot at that time, and then you know, Kwan said, this is not a good way to start a marriage and a family, and you know, why don't you considering teaching sociology or anthropology where you're trained? And I said, yeah, you know. So when this came up as a sabbatical for anthropology, I came in, and then by 1988 or 87, I was teaching sociology at the same time. And then there was a opening for a tenure track position in 1988. And I remember the Sherman Seldon, who's the anthropologist at that time, said, what would you like to teach? And I said, I teach anything, everything you want. At that time, there wasn't actually a sociology program. It was an anthropology, sociology combined, but there were no sociology topics. It was introduction to sociology, and that's about all. So if I want to teach a course, you would say, oh, anything, topics, choice, you know, that what you want to teach. So I came in 1988, my first mentioning of my job I want to do is to establish a sociology package program so that there are basic courses that in any sociology department would have to teach. So I ended up teaching like 8 different subjects. And of course I relearned myself. I never taught sociology other than intro. So I taught sociology of family, and then I taught race and racism, which was my dissertation topic anyway, so it was easy. And then I taught social stratification, which is inequality. So we do urban sociology, we do rural sociology, so I was like everywhere. And then at that time in 1991, we established also women's studies minor. And I was the first chair of the council, and I got into it. Basically, I had 3 courses which I created back in '88 when I came, were on women. So somehow my program, the minors program, I kind of created for that, sort of like fit 3 of my courses in there except that I have to do a course, not introduction to sociology, but introduction to gender studies. So we did gender and society, and slice it as sociology slide, WS, women's study. And I was a council chair on and off for 10 years until 2000.
Now, when you came into a social studies department. When you left, was it still a social studies department, or had it split up
Yes,
by that time?
it's still a social science department. I left mainly because they dissolved it. And I just felt like I feel that everything is diluted when a program could not be visible anymore. I felt that at that time period, I knew that no matter what I do, somehow I have to compete with other programs to be visible. And for me, I think that the changes for the college at this time, it's really difficult for a lot of professors as well. But I was lucky to be able to retire at the time of the height of the program. Basically, the sociology program was no longer joined. By 1998, 10 years down the road, we were able to have a sociology program and then anthropology program. So it was no longer, together.
Now, who were some of the other faculty in this sociology program?
So we hired, Grace Fraser and I actually established a program that is joined together when two of the anthropologists retired and the sociology retired. So we established the social program, and then we started hiring Robert Heiner, who first came, and mainly because we need a criminology, not because of criminal justice program now.
The relationship
it's in sociology we created criminology as a subfield, and we knew that I was overstretched. I cannot do any of those areas, and we need that, because when we talked about racism, we also have criminology involved, and there's a huge field that needs to be discussed. So it came on as one thing that we need to do. So Robert Heiner, Bob came, and then after that, in 2003, we hired Brian Eisenhower, and that was the environmental perspective. Basically, we have kind of covered almost all the field, and we need somebody in the environmental basis of looking at sustainability and development and so on. So we have to keep that particular one intact. At that time, I had already retired my rural sociology course, which I cover a lot on environment. Basically, we looked at farmers and farming and agriculture and poverty in rural area. Basically, that's what sociology covers, poverty. And also, all the kinds of things that people are in debt because they have to buy equipment and fertilizer. And that was a trend in America. So I think we need somebody who can be in that field to teach that. And somehow that's how it became a very good, intensive one. And we have people by the time of, 10 years down the road, 2000, by 2000, we have a couple of doctorates. We are able to have students accepted to the doctorate program. Whereas before, when I first came in 1988, there were only 5 or 4 major in anthropology and sociology, and partly basically there was no structure in the program. It was more like a feel-good program of finding an elective. So we have like anthropology of ESP, and that's not going to go for graduate school. Paranormal is not going to go. It's not a field that is, very realistic at the time.
Another interesting question, how did you see the sociology sort of interfacing with the social work program that was established at
It was at that time I came in, and then we also created the social work program. We wanted a social work program, and so we hired Scott Meyer, who came in, and Nancy, I can't remember, Steve came in later on. What's the wife name? Cindy Moniz. And so we had 2 people that came in, but Scott and me were the very first one that came in. So we collaboratively developed a lot of courses to do with sociology and social work that kind of combine, like healthcare is the basic part of what they have, mental health and healthcare. That was a field that they need to develop on that side. So, and so I do the rural sociology. Basically, we offer social work for practices within the social environment where rural area, the north, as well as, central part of New Hampshire. So we actually created that kind of, support program with one another. And then methodology, how do you do research on mental health and things like that. So Scott came in and did that outreach program, basically looking at that and methods, how do you study people in the rural area and so on. So it was a very interesting program that it was never actually a separate program. We were separated basically for technical purposes. The program that needs to be recognized, accreditation, involves too much resources from the social science. So resources enough, we almost like 50% of budget had to go through all these paperwork, all these inspections, evaluation. It was too much, and that's why, technically speaking, it's not going to do. And so it's very sad to see another, our program sort of like give away to become separate because of budget issue, but that has to change at that time.
Well, now here's another question that's a little bit different. You come from Singapore. I don't think that many students at Plymouth had any kind of relationship with someone from outside of the country, and particularly with a woman from outside of the country. So what was your experience being a woman from abroad teaching kids in New Hampshire that probably had never been even to Manchester, maybe?
I think it's a little bit very interesting because I grew up in a family that is Chinese is spoken as well as Malay and English. We are trilingualists. No languages in our community in Malaysia and Singapore were actually your prime mother source, I would say. So we usually have a sentence and we have like 3 little different languages kind of created like a Creole, patois. And that's how I grew up. So when I was asked to go to school, my family said we need some kind of mastering of a language, and by the 5th generation of Chinese immigrants coming to Singapore and Malaysia, we lost touch with literacy of able to read a Chinese newspaper, even though physically I look Chinese, but I wasn't really savvy in knowing how to talk, especially Mandarin. None of us are able to speak Mandarin because in the household, all of us grew up with dialects. So if you're from Fujian, you do Fujian dialect from your time. If you're from Cantonese, Canton, or Guangzhou, you do Cantonese. So we have all these Hainanese, all different dialects. So when we went to school, I was the last one in the family and said, you are the last one. You need to go and master the Chinese culture. So I was like almost being burdened into a language where I find Mandarin very, very difficult. And that's how I actually grew up, in the sense that we go to school, mastering the language, came home and was speaking Malay and Chinese dialects, and it was like a mixture. So when I came here, I'm already very savvy because I'm already able to speak Mandarin. I do have an accent. So usually my students have no problems. When I first came in this country, they love my accent. They say it's very unique, and they love that I have an accent. But when I was afraid of was a rejection from my students. Do they hear me and they understand? So I write a lot on what I pronounce, and I write it, the essential vocabulary, so that they know what I'm saying and what is being pronounced. So I do a lot of chalks the first time. But one of the things that was very interesting is a student came up one time, and she has a C, and I think she must have told her mom. Her mom called me up and tried to figure out whether it's because of my spoken language that she got a C. And then she, at the end of a very small little talk, and she said, "You speak very good English. I wonder why she got a C. It must be her, it's not you." That was, to me, was the funniest thing. And that was, I think I was about 5 or 6 years down the road teaching in Plymouth State. And I have somebody who came in and saying that, you know, I speak very good English. And it was not my fault that the student got a C from me.
Now, of course, coming from abroad and having had experience in abroad, what was your perception of Plymouth when you first came here?
It was very hard. I think the first day when I came as a bride, we got married in Singapore, and then I came here. The first thing I saw when I came in, because there's 2 o'clock flight arriving in Boston, Kwan, my husband, you know, fetched me, and I realized that there was no light, street lights. And I said, because in Boston, I studied and lived in 8 years, obviously, you know, with the lights. And the first thing I saw driving on a highway was there's no light. And then the second thing I discovered that the house was on well water. And I said, "How am I supposed to do that?" He said, "Well, don't drink too much of the water. If you're washing, you know, your laundry or our laundry, don't take a shower at the same time or, you know, right after, immediately." And I was like, well, water, treatment, you know, because of course in the city we have chlorine and all. He said, no need treatment. And it took me a very difficult time to understand that whole nature is so different in a rural area. And isolation was another key. What
kind of changes have you seen in the college since from the time that you started till when you retired a few years ago?
Yeah, I think that the changes I see is that, you know, it's larger, but it still have that small community feel of it. I think the connections, the networking is very. I think one thing that I really like about this college and teaching in Southern New Hampshire and also in Boston University before I came here, I had a feeling that this is a smaller, and people are nicer. Students are nicer, and I think that's one of the things. But I think isolation was one of the key things that I was very, very difficult. You know, everywhere you go, you have to drive. And it's really difficult, especially in the winter, when you are thinking about, can I get downtown, or can I get back when the sleet is coming? Yeah.
Was there anybody at Plymouth that you would say was sort of like a mentor to you during the time that you were here, or that you sort of formed a close friendship with because of being on the faculty?
I just love everybody. Everybody loves me. I don't have like a mentor. I was given free range as to what I want to create, and that was one of the things that was very, very good about Plymouth State. I felt I fit in. People looked at me as though I'm white or I'm whatever. I can do whatever I want. So I sort of forged my own way in a sense that I don't need anybody, because they kept telling me it's up to you. So it somehow, that support system was so strong that for me, none of the people are mentor, but at the same time, all of them are. So they're very, very kind to me. And in 2010, 2011, I said to them, I said, you know, I really love to have a historic preservation program because we need it. And I was a heritage study graduate school program in 2003 as a coordinator. I said, we need to have a historic preservation. And they're just like, up to you. And I said, so who should I go to? So I just call up somebody, hello, down in the preservation office in the New Hampshire Historical Resources, Division of Historical Resources, and I came upon Jim Garvin. And he was my mentor. But in a way, it was created with such that Plymouth State gave me green light and say, you go ahead, whatever you want to do. And I, of course, had a very strong mentor for that particular program, and it was a first Masters of Art program, MA program for us here in Plymouth State. Before that, there wasn't any Masters of Art program. And at the very same time, this program is also partnering with the Historic Preservation Agencies, federal government. And so I have very strong support for that partnering that I have established. So the influencer is everywhere, I would say.
Well, it sounds like you had a good working relationship with Grace and with Bob and some of the other people in your department.
Yeah, yeah.
Seemed like a very cohesive group.
It is very strong. It is very cohesive. We have, especially also the Women's Studies Council also had very strong program, support from almost everybody, from Sally Boland, who was one of the very first who started it, and she, I remember in faculty meeting, she was very strong. Dot Deal was very strong on helping me to establish the program. So there are so many of these people across the, it's big, but it's a very small group. And the women's studies particularly were very, very much together in organizing this. And then we also have Theo Calico, who was all the way, budget or And when we started with the mission statement, we were getting support from male members. Anindya Datta, who was an economist, he's from India, was in the business administration, and he helped me to draft the mission. So it was not just women; it was across the board, and he has nothing to do as economist, teaching economic has to do with women's studies program, and yet he lent support to establish that mission for us, for all of us. So it was a very interesting, and Steve Lambert, who was at the college, what you call outreach, internship type of thing, he went all out to do a film series, a women's study film series, and he goes all the way to Hanover, picked up the film once a month, and we have a series for 2 years. So it's a very, 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 very open and very supportive place to work. So I really cherish that tremendously.
And looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently that you say, well, maybe I should have done this, or you think?
No.
It's always
It was.
Always feels good to think that you might have done the right thing at the right time.
It was a very right, it has never meant to be. I felt like my life was not fated to be in this place. But I think everything just fall together. It seems somehow like magic in a way that all these years, 30 years, and now we continue to live here because, we love this area, and we just cannot feel where else do you find a place where everybody is so connected together? And friends, you don't have to have close friends. You can just pick up the phone and say, can you help me? I'm not going to be home and I forgot to switch off the lights. Could you come in and help me? And I have no close friends, but I can pick up a phone and can call anyone which is nearer, of course, logically speaking, to come in and help me. And they know where I put the keys. So that's how magical it is. And when people ask, like, where are you going after retirement? I cannot imagine going somewhere else. You going back to Singapore? No. No way, because I don't have that connections as much as I, left when I was 19.
Right.
I go back as a visitor to take care and visit my family for only 6 weeks in the summer. Right. So there is no connection with Singapore. And the development is so fast that I find when I go back,
with what's going on there.
I get lost, on the road.
Now, has your relationship, have you seen any change in the relationship that you've had with students when you first came as to what you have with students just before you retired?
I think the only comments I have is is to see people, if they can stop
Their
texting. I think that's a major change within the last 10 years. That's a major change that you tend to struggle with, to say it in front of other people or not. And sometimes I lose my tempo, and I felt like I had to stop somebody. And that, to me,
have a basket by the door. When they came in, they had to put the phones in the basket.
I wish they they can do that. But somehow that's one thing that I find is very
That you find
difficult.
different today.
Yeah.
Now, we're just about, towards the end of our interview. Is there something that we haven't really talked about that you would like to bring up? I mean, this is sort of somewhat open-ended to give you a chance to expound on something that you think maybe we should have covered, or that you'd like to see a little bit more detail about.
I think that I find that this Plymouth State is still with me, inside me, and I'm so connected with almost everybody, whether they're retired or not. So somehow the college has not cut me off with emails. So every time when they have like an announcement or something, I felt like I'm still part of the community. I think that to me is very special, that they did not forget you, but they did not exclude you and say bye, but they still feel that you are part of them, and it's part of me. So I just feel like I feel very good in where I am, but I'm still, anytime when they want to ask me to teach, I'll come back.
Now, have you gotten used to having well water and no street lights?
That is really a tough question.
We had an interesting experience. We had a woman come over from China that didn't realize that you had two taps and you could use both of them to get the right water. So she either got boiling hot water or freezing cold water.
Oh my
And
goodness.
didn't realize that you could actually do the same thing. Well, we thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And as we say, we're trying to make these available in the long haul so that people will know us a long time from now.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you. Do you know that